and it revealed a pretty enormous cyst on one ovary that I think was described as the size of a grapefruit. So it was huge. And in fact, I could see it when I looked down. I could see the kind of protrusion on one side. And so with that in place, I was quickly dealt with. In fact, within 5 weeks, I was booked into the local hospital to have an operation for it. And in fact, at the time, keyhole surgery was really, really new and hadn't made it to Barrow-in-Furness, which is where I was living. And so for me, it was the complete, we'll have to slice you open and deal with it that way. I will also mention that at the time when I went into hospital, they didn't know what it was. Endometriosis was one possibility of about 5. I have no idea what 3 of them were, because the other one that I do remember was cancer, and it could have been that. And of course, that was a little bit unnerving.
Welcome back to the Plant Fueled podcast with me, Callum Weir. That was Annette Henry. In today's episode, we jump right into the world of endometriosis and what it's like to live with that condition. The pain, the struggles, the ups and downs, the complete journey from diagnosis to cure, which came in the form of something very, very, very unexpected. Annette, along with her newly found knowledge in hand, took endometriosis on head to head and over time dismantled the reins that it had upon her. This episode is a complete eye-opener to anyone who has been struggling with this condition. Annette now runs the Plant-Centered Nutrition Hub along with her husband, Callum Henry, who was on the first episode of the Plant Fueled podcast with his own incredible story. So let's sit back and let's jump in. Annette, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
So you're the other half of Henry and Henry, wife of Graham, who we had on a few weeks back, with his own amazing transformation story with weight loss. But you, of course, have your own incredible story, which I feel obviously needs to be shared with the world.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm happy to share it.
So you, of course, struggled with endometriosis, but not only struggled, but beat the condition altogether, which is absolutely outstanding. So for those who are listening, what exactly is endometriosis?
Well, the short answer to that is that it's when the lining of the endometrium, so the womb, if you like, it thickens as it's supposed to do, and creates a situation where it becomes too thick, it grows too much, and it can grow outside of that area as well, and that's when it becomes problematic. And so instead of everything shedding every month, as is normally the case, some of it stays put because it's grown in places where that would never be able to be shed. And so, for example, on ovaries, on different parts of the abdominal cavity altogether. I mean, and sometimes I do believe I was told that I had a lesion between one of my intestine and the wall of my abdomen, which probably accounts for why I felt very full after eating, especially in an evening sometimes, because my gut was out of line. So it can be anywhere, mostly in the abdominal cavity, but they've been known to grow in other places as well, and it grows somewhat uncontrollably unless it's treated in some way.
So I know for me, and I think every kind of other guy out there listening, we won't ever be able to relate to this pain or this condition in any way, shape, or form. So putting myself in those shoes to feel that pain and experience that is truly impossible, to be fair. And that goes with so many different issues that us guys don't face on a day-to-day basis, such as like obviously periods, the menopause. So it's very hard to gauge on our part what the other is feeling. But I think that can obviously happen to other girls as well, because obviously some girls have very light periods, don't have that kind of pain. And obviously no girls can never understand the pain that other girls are going through when they have other issues.
So it's one of those things that, especially for me, trying to learn as much as I can so I can kind of at least try to understand the pain somebody is in, because obviously it's a chronic condition.
Yeah, and the pain could be absolutely excruciating. It had me almost. Well, I had to actually go into the staff room where I was teaching, out of a lesson into the staff room and lie down, because it was lie down or faint at one time at work when I had it. And that it turned out to be that one of these lesions was attached to one of my ovaries, and it was twisting it when I was ovulating. So that's why I got it once every 2 months, and I couldn't figure that out for ages, because of course I had no idea what it was, and it was every time that one was releasing an egg, and it really was absolutely excruciating. And I used to be quite scared of it happening when I was driving, because I thought, what am I going to do if this comes on while I'm behind the wheel? It's not safe. So yes, it's beyond normal. This is not period pain. It's awful.
So, if you don't mind, let's just dive into your journey as such.
Okay. Well, I think it's fair to say that I'd had a challenging time as a female right from the start. Really, hormonally, I was disadvantaged. I would describe it as I had a difficult time. I had a difficult time at school, and was constantly having to take time off school. I'm surprised I actually completed my education fairly successfully, because I literally had to take time off every month, because I needed to be near a toilet, and school was not going to provide that for me. So that was pretty awful, and that was throughout my teenage years for the most part. And it didn't get a lot better. It did get a little bit better and a bit more manageable as I got older, thankfully. So university wasn't quite such a trial. But then it was in my 30s. So in the latter part of my 30s, I started noticing that I was getting these pains that I've just referred to. And things were really getting out of hand. I was again feeling terrible every month, and in a state really. It really wasn't ideal. I won't go into a lot of detail. It's really, really very unpleasant, but I think you'll have to use your imagination there. And it was repeated experiences of this pain that finally, I mean, actually, when this happened in the staff room, I went to somebody took me to A&E, which was obviously the right thing to do, and they kept me in to observe, to see what was going on, and they didn't bother to give me a scan, which was unfortunate. So the next day, since they couldn't find what it was, they had no idea, they let me go again. And so, of course, that wasn't the end of it. It came back. I got another one. And eventually I thought that this isn't right. This is absolutely, it is too much. This is that nobody has this kind of pain. I had talked to other women. It wasn't normal. And I went to my own GP and explained to him what was going on. And he just wrote a prescription for ibuprofen and pushed it across the table to me. And I thought, no, that's not enough. It really isn't enough. I think I need a scan. And it wasn't going to be forthcoming on the NHS. So I went and paid for the scan, which was fairly expensive. And it revealed a pretty enormous cyst on one ovary that I think was described as the size of a grapefruit. So it was huge. And in fact, I could see it when I looked down. I could see this kind of protrusion on one side. And so with that in place, I was quickly dealt with. In fact, within 5 weeks, I was booked into the local hospital to have an operation for it. And in fact, at the time, keyhole surgery was really, really new and hadn't made it to Barrow-in-Furness, which is where I was living. And so for me, it was the complete, we'll have to slice you open and deal with it that way. I will also mention that at the time when I went into hospital, they didn't know what it was. Endometriosis was one possibility of about 5. I have no idea what 3 of them were, because the other one that I do remember was cancer, and it could have been that. And of course, that was a little bit unnerving. But anyway, it turned out to be endometriosis. The surgeon himself, the actual specialist who'd been dealing with me, ended up doing the operation himself, even though he wasn't booked in to do it, because it was too demanding for the for the doctor who was in charge, because the lesions were all over the place. It was such a mess, apparently. It sounded awful when I got to hear about it later on. And then that was followed up. So that was full blown cut you open surgery, and you have to be in hospital for the next 5 days recovering. And that also involved some pretty unpleasant hormone treatment, which gave me a temporary menopause. And so I had to have these very big injections in my abdomen once a month to induce this menopause. And it was something they told me I must never have it again, because it would be dangerous, which didn't fill me with a great deal of confidence, I must say. So I did all this. I did what I was supposed to do. I had all the time off work that I was supposed to have off work, and everything seemed to go quite well. But it wasn't long before I realized I was getting symptoms again that were familiar. And so I went back to the doctor, to my GP this time. In fact, I think I saw the specialist again as well. And they certainly, the doctor put me on, he was going to put me back on this Zoladex, actually, which that was frightening to me. The Zoladex was the big injection that they'd been giving me, which I'd been told that under no circumstances must I ever go on it again. You can only have that once in your lifetime, apparently. So I wasn't very comforted by that. And he put me on a progestin, which is a synthetic form of progesterone. So not surprisingly, that had unpleasant side effects. It seemed to make a bit of a difference for a while, dampened it down. So then I finished the course of that. And not long after, we're talking, all of this happened within a couple of years, really. It was back again. And so I was going through the same situation, thinking, I really don't want to go on all of this nasty stuff, or even have further surgery, which was being talked about. And I would have had to be sent off to Manchester so that I could have the keyhole surgery. So, away from anywhere where I knew anybody, that wouldn't have been as much fun either. So something changed, because I started thinking, I really don't want to go through this. I'm sick of this. And there must be something else I can do. And I just started researching, which we're talking about 20 years ago here. So the internet was not part of my research. And I was reading books, I was finding things in magazines, and I went talking to pharmacists in chemists and just to see if there was anything else. And I came across natural progesterone, and I thought, well, that will at least be better than the progestin that they've been prescribing. So I gave that a go for it. Well, actually, I actually asked the specialist if I could go on that. Both he and the GP I spoke to about this, and they were both really surprised. They said, "How did you know about that?" Because it's something that it exists and they have it, but they don't prescribe it. It's not a patentable drug, and they don't talk about it. But anyway, I got I got suppositories, and I thought, oh, this is going to give me an insight into how they do it in France. And sure enough, it did. They made a difference, but it was a bit heavy going in. Those big things, they weren't that nice. But at least I got something that wasn't causing horrible side effects this time. So that was encouraging, but it still wasn't the answer. I was still not clear of it. And
oh, sorry. Did this, obviously these pills that you were taking, did they calm down the pain that you were going through, or was it still there but just lowered?
There were multiple different symptoms, many of which were not problematic, but there's almost like a feeling. I could feel things were not right, and I'd become used to knowing what to expect there because I'd been quite familiar with it. So in terms of pain, that was much less than it never went back to being how awful it was in the time when I hadn't, before I'd had any surgery. It never went back to that level of pain. But I could tell, and I was more bloated and just in a lot of discomfort, really, rather than pain. So, yes, as I say, I got to the point where I wanted to try something different, got as far as these huge suppositories. And then, as it still was clearly not resolved, I was still on the lookout, still trying to find out anything I could that was a little bit more natural. And one day, by pure chance, it's almost like when you wish for something, sometimes you get what you want. And I walked into Waterstones, and there on the shelf was a book that said Healing Endometriosis Through Nutrition. I thought, right, I'll have a look at that. And it seemed to be, it was quite thick. It was clearly quite biological, which I was really glad about at the time, because this was somewhere I had no idea why on earth would food make a difference to this. It didn't seem to make sense at all. So I had a good look through it, and there were case studies in it. It was quite biological. So I thought that, my biology is not brilliant, but that doesn't matter. I need something that's going to actually persuade me rather than some kind of airy fairy, this will work wonders for you kind of book without any grounding. So I bought it, I read it, and it made such a lot of sense. And this the woman who'd written it was I can't remember if she's a dietitian or a nutritionist, but somebody who'd experienced endometriosis herself and gone through a lot of work to clear it, and also to work with other patients. So she had lots of case studies quite legitimately, and went through all the reasons why, and reasons why certain foods make a difference, why some are more harmful than others. And the biggest thing I think I took from that, apart from tidying up my diet in many ways, really, I did make quite a big, I decided I was going to do it. There was no question, I was going to do it. But the biggest thing I think was she'd written that it can be particularly problematic to have dairy if you're from an atopic family. So in other words, if you suffer from something like hay fever, and I did. So I decided to cut the dairy straight away, all of it. I didn't have any at all. And I felt I'd got some confirmation quite early on from that one, because I think it was very early in the year when I did that. And then by the summer, guess what? I had almost no hay fever for the first time in years, until I inadvertently had some potatoes when I was out that were coated in butter, and then I was streaming again. So I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I think that was a big factor. The biggest thing of all, though, and of course you can't see inside you, so you don't really know what's going on, but little by little I was starting to feel much more normal, and I thought, I don't need to go back to the doctor. And I didn't, and I have never been back to the doctor for that at all, ever. And it never came back. I changed my diet. At that point, it was much more whole foods. She wasn't the person who wrote it wasn't vegetarian, wasn't vegan, so she wasn't recommending cutting out meat, although she wasn't keen on red meat. So that was easy to ditch that, because I wasn't having it anyway. And I was having fish, because she made a big thing about the omega-3 connection. So fish and white meat, I was having that, and that was pretty much it. Oh, eggs, that was it. Other than that, I wasn't having any other animal products. Meat had gone, dairy had completely gone, and that's as possibly a factor as well, that there are all sorts of things behind dairy that are coming to light. I know that's something that Dr. Neil Barnard has looked at, but also it's fairly obvious to me that I will have dramatically reduced my intake of saturated fat by not having dairy, because I was suddenly having no butter, no cheese, no milk, and that may also have helped. I don't know. There are all sorts of possible reasons why it made a difference, but I suspect that along with a better diet, more vegetables, certainly a lot more vegetables and whole grains, I was probably advantaged by not having the dairy, I think. So that really was such a source of illumination to you. I mean, I was fascinated. I spent a couple of years being a little bit angry as well, if I'm honest, because all that time I spent visiting all of these different medical people who were lovely. I was well treated. I'm certainly not complaining about them. And I thought, why did they not ever mention diet in any way, shape or form? Nothing. There was no reference to it whatsoever. The closest anybody came was saying, oh, you're nice and slim, but it's difficult to get this injection in you because I might puncture something, which was also not the best thing to hear. other than that, there was nothing relating in any way to food, my weight, my general health, nothing. Which comes as no surprise now. I didn't have any idea at the time that doctors simply are not taught about nutrition. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's around in our whole 7 years. I think it's 15 hours nutrition.
On a good day, I mean, well, on a good course. I mean, that's much more recent. Well, that's probably about 10 years ago. I actually trawled through the UCAS listings of medical schools to find out what the offerings were for students in terms of nutrition. And there were a few universities who were offering it in the way that you just suggested. But in most cases, it was an elective, so it wasn't obligatory anyway. And in some, it really wasn't there. So I was thinking, this is quite terrible. It's 3 times a day most people eat, and what goes into their bodies is clearly important. It makes a big difference. So I had a huge and invasive surgery that cost the NHS a lot of money, and was took me a long time to recover from. And did I need it? I mean, maybe I did. Maybe it had gone so far that I did need it. But it's interesting as well to me, and I think this is probably interesting to a lot of people, especially if you are familiar with endometriosis. It may well have some kind of genetic link, which, of course, then makes people think, well, there's nothing else I can do about it. It's my genes. Clearly, I did do something about it. And shortly after I'd had my operation, within the next 2 or 3 years, both of my sisters had operations for endometriosis.
Wow.
None of us had ever heard of it until I had mine.
Hmm.
And when they knew that I was doing this, reading this book and following the advice, the nutritional advice. And the next sister in line, I'm the eldest, she phoned up one day and said, "What's that book you've been reading?" She said, "I've got it back again. I don't want to go through that anyway. I don't want another operation." And I smiled to myself and thought, well, this is a very thick book, and my sister's not a big fan of reading. This will be interesting. But it turns out she did read it. She read it all. She completely took all the advice. And not only did she not need to go back for treatment for endometriosis, she, not long after, got pregnant. So I now have a nephew that we never expected we would have, but because she thought she was infertile, which is a condition, an associated challenge for a lot of people who have this. However, the other sister, for whatever reason, and I certainly don't blame her, because if you put your trust in doctors and the medical profession, you're never going to conclude this. She decided this was not for her. She didn't want to change her diet. For some reason, it wasn't going to work for her. And I think she's, since that point, has had in total 5 operations. So for endometriosis, that is. So that's quite significant. That tells me a lot.
That is a large number to be having. Yeah.
Yeah. She still hasn't given up dairy, even though having cream makes her physically sick. I love my sister. She's a strong person. That for some reason this didn't chime with her, and she didn't go with it.
Mm.
So that really is the story of the endometriosis, which I say was quite some time ago. But it set me off. It really set me off being absolutely fascinated by food. This new medicine I felt I'd discovered that doctors didn't even know about. And I decided as well that it would probably be a good idea to stick with it, because obviously at that point I was in my late 30s, just creeping into my 40s. And I thought, menopause probably isn't that far off. If this worked for a hormone-dependent condition, then it's probably going to make a difference for me going through menopause. And based on the history I'd had with hormone health, I thought it was probably a really good idea to do whatever I could for myself. And I think I won't say I sailed through without any incident. And really, it was so much lighter than I might have imagined. I didn't have many of the symptoms that a lot of people talk about, that I had about, I don't know, 5 hot flushes the whole time. I didn't really count that, it wasn't like that, but over the course of however long it took, it really didn't happen for me. So I felt really, really lucky. And also when other things cropped up as well, I looked first to what I was eating to see if there were any more tweaks I needed. So there was a while, I would say this was in my early 40s, as a teacher, I realized one day that where I thought the world had gone a little bit wrong, I realized actually it was me, and I was seeing things through a bit of a gloomy lens, and I realized I had low mood. So I took another look at different books, and did I have the internet by then? I'm not sure. Not for extensive searching like we do now anyway. And decided that I probably needed to work on B vitamins a bit more. So I took them as a supplement at the time. I didn't think of improving my food particularly. It made a modest difference. I think that the bigger difference there came from learning other things, or ultimately meditation. But I was still keen to look at food. And I think now, if I'd known what I know now, then I probably would have made bigger strides with the food, because by now, in 2022, I'm a fully fledged whole food vegan. Really, I suppose that's the best description. No animal products, no processed foods, really, apart from the minimally processed things that are used typically in a whole food plant-based diet, I would say.
So kind of like tofu, tempeh.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Everything else is kind of
love
out
tempeh.
of question. Oh, tempeh, I absolutely love it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, obviously, when you cut out dairy, you did that overnight. But obviously, back then, was that hard? Because dairy at that point was being pushed very, very heavily throughout schools, throughout most industries, that we have to have 3 cups of dairy a day to feel the effects of masculinity, to feel this, to have strong bones, all these different kinds of bits. So cutting out dairy at a time like that probably was, I'd say, difficult.
Yes, it was. And I remember being quite scared, because I had this idea that, if I didn't have dairy, then clearly I was going to crumble, because my bones would give way. And there was the additional challenge of, bear in mind as well, I didn't live in the most cosmopolitan and enlightened part of the world. Barrow-in-Furness has its charms, but it's not very. I didn't know anybody else who wasn't eating dairy. Put it that way. I was it. I was the only one, and so I was a bit of a curiosity. And certainly going out was always a little bit difficult. I don't really have tea and coffee much, so having I don't think I was drinking any of it then either particularly. So the milk issue in drinks wasn't a problem. But because I didn't have red meat, and I didn't always want whatever else they had on the menu that was meat based, even if it was chicken sometimes, I would look at the vegetarian options and thought, well, they're out, because they're all with cheese without exception. It was like, oh, if you're vegetarian, you'll be having cheese. And occasionally I can remember particularly, and this still happens, I think, now and then, this sort of thing. I can remember actually saying to the waitress, can you tell me if this has dairy in it? Because it was some pasta dish that looked like it might not have dairy in it. I'll just go and ask for you. So off she went to go and ask for me, came back and she said, it's got gluten in it. Yeah, that's not really what I was asking for, but it wasn't understood, and that was a bit difficult. And getting over the fear of my bone health was probably the biggest factor. And again, I took to books and all sorts of reading materials to try and figure out whether it was something I should be concerned about, and where else I could get calcium from. I think I don't even know if I was looking I just don't think there were really even fortified milks then. I remember drinking quinoa milk, but it wasn't fortified. I don't think there really were very many fortified milks.
I think the only milk that you could probably count as a calcium ready milk back then was probably rice milk, at most. But rice milk is also probably one of the worst milks I've ever had.
Yeah, I didn't go for that. I never, yeah, I didn't, yeah. If it was served to me, fine, I would have it now and then, but it wasn't one I chose to buy. I didn't have that. So, but I started reading about it, and I can remember reading about finding out that about 70% of the world's population is naturally lactose intolerant. And I thought that was a stunning discovery. I thought, well,
I am one of those
crumbling.
people.
Yes, I'm one of those people. I know we've since discovered, of course, that you're actually unusual if you're lactose persistent, because it is normal for us to stop drinking milk after weaning, and I just didn't know that. But that was a huge relief to find that out, and to start realizing that there are other sources of calcium in foods as well. So gradually, I stopped being concerned, and I was finding it easier to ask for what I wanted in restaurants and so on. So it got easier, and I moved to York when I got together with Graham, and that's a little bit more outgoing, and times were changing, so it's always got easier and easier. And of course now it's fairly standard. Go somewhere now, and they will have plant-based milk and other options, so I don't struggle with it now.
That's the thing. Even when I found out, well, it's only like maybe 5-6 years ago when I found out I was actually lactose intolerant, that at this point the movement, or like the vegan or the plant-based movement, still hadn't really developed, and there's slowly different milks coming out, such as kind of like almond milk. Oat milk wasn't a thing at this point, but it's one of those things where there was still so little there was so little information still around there, or I just wasn't coming across the information, that I would still make myself very ill by consuming milk and consuming cheeses, just because I thought that was obviously the only way to get calcium. Because obviously when you're younger, especially through like TV advertisements and that, you used to get those like little Yakult yogurt adverts being like, oh, make your bones grow stronger. So I was like, oh, calcium. And that only comes from cows. And then once you kind of research and get really into it, there's like 1,000 other options.
Yes, there are so many other options. Yes, and it's been a whole revelation to me, and that's the biggest thing I've ever done. The giving up dairy, and the biggest revelation to me. And then the changes have continued since then, and even in recent years, Graham and I made quite noticeable changes to our diet, because even though we were plant-based from about 2013, 2014, I would say, more or less, anyway, a bit of fish now and then, but apart from that, we were fairly plant-based from that point onwards. But we were eating a very, well, quite a high-fat raw vegan diet. In fact, I put into Chronometer, the nutritional what do you call it, like feedback tools that there is to find out what you're eating, analysis, and I put a typical day into Chronometer one day after we changed our diet, and it came out as being noticeably over 50% of my calories from fat. I thought, oh dear, that can't be right. And what I haven't mentioned yet was that in 2017, just at Christmas, I was in a French restaurant, my cousin's French restaurant, with the rest of my family and Graham. And there was a woman who quite clearly should not have been out, and was coughing and sneezing and really not very well. And I was confident I would not get it. However, I did get it. I had the most awful flu for Christmas. Which I was a bit indignant about, because I thought I eat a great diet. Why am I getting this flu? It's really quite pompous of me. And it didn't really disappear. And well, I mean, it changed in terms of the normal flu symptoms disappeared, but I was left with chronic fatigue for the whole of 2018 and into 2019. And that's what triggered a change, because I thought that I got this vague recollection of hearing some of these plant-based doctors talking about high fat being a problem. And I started to really examine this. And also they were talking about fruit, don't be scared of fruit. And I was slightly being lured into the, fruit, sugar is sugar, that sort of thing, And so I wasn't having very much fruit at all. I was eating a little bit, but my fat intake, I mean, coconut oil, no problem. I could get it out with a spoon, and that's nice. I like that. We're making desserts with coconut oil with nuts and cacao butter and avocados, olive oil, drizzle it on, get some sesame oil, that kind of thing. We had about 4 different bottles of oil that we tried to fit into the fridge, because we wanted some hemp oil as well, for the omega-3, and flax oil. So it really was quite heavy duty on the oils, and so I cut them out. I cut them out completely, and I still don't have any. On the rare occasions that we're out, maybe somebody puts that. I'm guessing I sometimes eat olive oil, and I think once in a while it's not a problem. But other than that, we don't have them in the house, and I eat loads of fruit now, and it resolved this chronic fatigue, which is a real relief, because we don't live in York anymore. We live in Berlin. We wanted to make this move to Berlin, and we made it across land. Most people would fly. We didn't. We decided to take our things, pick our suitcases up, and leave everything else in storage and go. And we came overland and sea. And there's no way I would have managed that with the fatigue I'd had in the previous year. So I've got full energy back, and we're walking about 5 miles a day just to keep fit, really, just for enjoyment. So it's been really instructive to me to learn about this. And of course, well, not of course, but we did learn as well. We went through a long learning process, the two of us, a year-long learning process of intense study with 2 of America's leading lights in, actually, it was called Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. But in fact, their raw food is really about natural food, and about not having all, it's whole food, it's raw whole food. But also they teach a lot about the plant-based doctors who've had such successes, like Dean Ornish and Cobalt Esselstyn, and about the China study. So, and it certainly wasn't all about raw food only. So it was much broader than that. It was superb. I had high expectations when I took it, and they were far exceeded. It was an absolutely excellent course, and we know so much more now than we did before. And it's really superb to be able to cut through a lot of the stuff that comes at you from newspapers and realize that there's such an incredible bias in what they choose to report, and to be able to, we were taught to look at studies as well and look for conflicts of interest and things like that. So it's been really, really helpful. We feel that we're not getting sidelined and sidetracked anymore into things that are not helpful to us.
I feel like if obviously when you found this book that helped you, if the internet was a big thing, then you probably just could have jumped on there and researched, but without that knowledge could have taken in anything. Because I think this is, especially in today's society, that people will find an issue with themselves, whether it be kind of like, just flu symptoms, and be like, oh, how do I fix this? And then you'll go on, and like the first 20 pages of Google are very industry funded studies from places like Healthline, who Healthline blow my mind, because obviously they're meant to be this healthy eating, healthy nutrition, yet they're promoting a lot of bad things on there at the same time. So kind of, if your life would have been probably so different if you hadn't, if the internet was still around, if it was around then, because that book probably wouldn't have really come into existence in your hand, and you might be going through that.
Yeah, I've never thought about that, actually. I think on balance, I think I'm lucky that I didn't have that, because I don't think I would have known. I didn't have it. The internet is a brilliant tool. It's an absolutely brilliant tool if you know how to sort through all the different material there.
Yeah, once you decide.
And I had no idea. I couldn't have been discerning. I just didn't have. I had no background, no knowledge, nothing. So I needed something that was in a form like this book, where it was solid information from a clinician who knew what she was talking about. So I think I was extremely lucky to come across that, and to not go through all the different contradictory messages coming from the internet. So much as I love it, and I certainly use it now, I think I would have been possibly misled, and I don't know, who knows? I mean, I might have landed on something useful, but I did, and I landed on something useful that wasn't internet based because I just didn't have the internet. So yeah, it's a good thing I've not thought about it. It's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, because like this is the thing. Like I feel back then when there was actually the research coming out, and it was going into books, it was probably better resourced than
Yes.
nowadays, where it's an absolute minefield. And I get this doing what I do is I will post something that is relevant from a good study, and somebody will be like, oh no, that's wrong, and show me a study from a website called gotmilk.com. I'm like,
Oh, really?
I'm like, can you not see the issues here? And like I try to be as nice about it, because I don't want to be, because obviously everybody learns in their own way, and everybody, it's, unless you're lucky enough to know how to kind of decipher stuff on the internet, then people do get misled. So I don't get angry at people that do send me things like from websites saying like, from for instance Got Milk, which obviously promotes milk, but I'm like, you have to look who's funding these as well. And like when you don't have those fundamental biases behind it, then normally the study is quite good. But obviously nowadays everything's being pushed by every different kind of company to try promote this is the best thing, this is the best thing. Whereas having a book literally in black and white that wasn't, or as you know, wasn't an industry, what's it called, industry funded in any way, shape, or form. It's just it's good you got there while you did. Otherwise,
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was lucky.
So at this point, you were still eating obviously fish and a bit of meat as well. What then made you transition onto whole foods, plant based, or was it like a gradual? Like, I'm going to cut out fish today, going to cut out, let's say, chicken.
It was fairly gradual. I mean, there's a bit of an admission here, because I wasn't vegetarian or vegan when Graham and I got together, which was 2009, 2010, and then we got married in 2011. We didn't hang around long. We already knew each other, you see. Because he was still eating he was still eating red meat, and I'd turned up on his doorstep effectively one day to visit, with the demand that I'd really quite like all my food to be organic. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable about that, because I knew that was not usual for most people. But he was very, very obliging. He was very good about it, and organic was what we had. So I thought, in order not to be too difficult, I will have some meat. So I for a short time, I was having a little bit of red meat again. But then gradually that reduced, and I started eating less. Graham was eating very similarly to me, and something surprising took place. He had been, when we got together, he'd been getting close to 18 stone and eating like me. And remember, I was eating, as far as I was concerned, I was eating for a gynecological issue, fundamentally. But he started to lose weight, and there was no, he wasn't trying to, he had no, he wanted to, but he'd kind of given up, because he'd tried so many different diets, and they'd all effectively failed on him one way or another. And so he was eating decent portions of food and losing weight. So we became fascinated, the two of us, because for me it was like, how is my endometriosis diet making him lose weight? And I of course I had some vague idea in the back of my head that if you eat more naturally, you probably are going to fare better, but I didn't have much to back that up. And so it really was a fairly gradual process. And I think it was 2013 we booked on a retreat, a raw food retreat in Wales, that was quite entertaining as well. I don't know if Graham would be pleased that I'm telling this story, but because he was suddenly not having any alcohol, tea, coffee, none of that, he had withdrawal symptoms, and we got a little bit concerned about the level of toilet roll in the whole house where we were, and whether or not it would be replenished in time. So yeah, he definitely had withdrawal symptoms. So we started to notice that things do make it, what you put in your body really does make a difference. Some of it quickly, and some of it happens more slowly. And it just became a process. We were really quite taken by this retreat that we'd been on, although not immediately. I remember we were driving up towards Bangor, which is where I'd been at university, and we'd said, well, no, we don't want to do this raw thing. No, don't fancy that. And the first place we stopped off at was Debenhams in Bangor. And we went up to the cafe because we were hungry. We hadn't had any lunch. And we looked at all the sort of cakes and confectionery that they had in the chiller there. And we just thought, oh, that doesn't look very nice. Because we'd just been eating all this vibrant food for a few days. And then we thought, yeah, maybe we should try this raw food thing. And so we did, and we bought the equipment. We bought the high-speed blender and a dehydrator. And that's what set us off on this gourmet route. And it was great fun. I was able to prepare food, me in the kitchen. I'm a non-event. I'm cooking. Graham's embarrassing story about me would be that when he first came to visit me in Barrow and wanted to cook something in the oven, he had to actually remove the packaging first, because I hadn't. I had never used the oven. Cooking was not for me. It wasn't something I did. So he used a brand new oven. I'd been in the house several years, but he used a brand new oven. Doing raw food, I was good at this, and so I was making these quite fancy desserts. And the business that we'd started, which was a version of what we have today, but clearly different, involved having people at our home for raw food lunches, and they went down very well. People were quite excited by it. Not surprisingly, they were getting loads and loads of fat and sort of sweeteners. We used sweeteners, agave syrup. We were quite liberal with that as well. So this really was not the best diet. I mean, certainly we had plenty of vegetables, definitely, but this was not a good diet. So it's only in the last 3 or 4 years, I would say, that our diet has been what I would class as particularly good, based on proper evidence now, as well as our own personal evidence, knowing how we feel. And it's been very easy for Graham to sustain a really healthy weight, which is nice, because he was doing okay on the high fat raw food diet, believe it or not, but it kept creeping up a bit, and he kept having to kind of rein things in. Whereas now he certainly doesn't need to go hungry. It doesn't ever need to do that. You just don't. You don't when you eat a whole food plant-based diet. You do not need to be hungry. In fact, you need to eat loads, which is music to my ears. I love to eat plenty of food.
That's the thing. Like when I went onto a whole foods diet, I was kind of like, in your head you think you're going to starve, but you're like, oh, this is not going to be filling, because when you're taking away, because normally you can find like a burger or something, you're like, that's gonna fill me up, that calorie density, that's very much that's gonna help me go through the day. But 2 hours later, I'm starving. Whereas when I went to Whole Foods, like I can make a bolognese and but like a lentil bolognese of all, like, the vegetables in it, and devour the whole lot, basically.
Yeah.
It's like a tin and a half of lentils, all these other bits and pieces, and I'm done for a good 4 or 5 hours. And it's just knowing that I can eat more as well, because that is one thing I used to struggle with a lot, was overeating and overconsumption myself. And I know, like, knowing that I was a hungry person, I didn't think this is ever going to work for me. But if anything, I can now eat a lot more, feel more satisfied, and still have the results I want, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's right. So you do have, people always talk about more energy. I have more energy. It's absolutely true. You absolutely do. You have more energy, and I think it's a really good way of sustaining the right weight, that your own natural weight, which is wonderful, really.
Which is absolutely amazing that you managed to go through this, especially like from like just having this whole entire journey, being able to change yourself, being able to change how your life journey from what it could have been, and then obviously helping then Graham as well, because this obviously effectively, this diet that you had been on then effectively helped Graham to obviously lose weight as well, which is, if anything, it's killed 2 birds with 1 stone, really. Or as we or us as us vegans call it, feeding two birds with one scone. Taking away the cruelty out of that. So
Yeah,
if anything, you've essentially, yeah, you've hit two birds one stone, and it's become great.
yeah, it has, and it's really instructive because, of course, the medical mindset which we all take on, because that's what we're immersed in, is one treatment for one condition and then a different treatment for a different condition. And it turns out a whole food, plant-based or vegan diet, whichever way you want to call it, it is pretty much a one size fits all, and you will make improvements to a lot of health conditions just by eating those foods. And of course, if you've got multiple different things going on, then you probably find that you resolve quite a few of them, or at least they are alleviated by the food that you eat. I mean, it's not going to solve everything. There are all sorts of different conditions people have, but non-communicable diseases, the things that people are struggling with these days, the heart disease, diabetes, certain cancers, these can really be affected by food. And I really wish people knew about it more and had much more access to both the information and the type of food primarily that would be suitable for them, because I know that there are certainly fruits and vegetables in all supermarkets, but there are so many other things that divert people's attention, and it's not made clear to people that this would be a lot better for them. And if it is, in some cases, they then choose to ignore it because it doesn't fit with society. It's not the way we roll at the moment, unfortunately. And it's been, I think we've just had a wake-up call and missed it in terms of COVID, because people are still, in fact, not only did they still eat badly, a lot of people ate more badly during the lockdown, which I understand. There are reasons for that. There's a lot of emotional issues involved in eating as well, so there's a lot to look at. But I just feel that in terms of governments of the world, they've missed a golden opportunity to do something to reduce those hospitalizations that we saw so much at the start, and to some degree now as well. And they haven't done it. They've stopped looking there. They don't even talk about vitamin D anymore. Like, get that out of the way. We've got something else to look at. Let's not bother with any of that. Let's not even consider that there might at some point in the future be another pandemic. There'll be other viruses, other bacterial infections. And I think this is short-sighted, and I personally think it's bordering on criminal. But that's maybe I'm an extremist. I don't know.
I completely agree. I think it is one of those things that they needed to mention, especially because there was people that obviously had weight issues that were more susceptible to obviously getting COVID, and obviously there's many other issues surrounding COVID and different illnesses, and where we're getting our food from, if we're going to feed our bodies the more nutritious food, or we're going to feed them the more the foods that are going to make our health worse. And they never ever mentioned any of that. It was normally just kind of firing from country to country, just kind of seeing who can make a better deal with something. But there was nothing to do with anybody's health at all, ever. But saying that, when we go back to health, when you did cure your endometriosis, did you not want to go back to the doctor and be like, you know what, this is how I did it?
It's a really good question. By that time, I'd been living, as I think I've alluded to, living in Cumbria. When I started this journey, I was in a place called Ulverston, which is just the other side of Barrow, if you like, and the near side when you're travelling to Barrow, which is at the end of a very long cul-de-sac called the Furness Peninsula. And so I moved into Barrow to be closer to work, which means I changed doctors. And I did go to that doctor just to sign up, really, and have an initial interview. And I actually told him that I'd resolved endometriosis through food. And he kind of put his head onto one side and just nodded at me. And he might as well have said, "Yes, dear, of course you did." And I thought, right, I shan't be mentioning that again. I felt quite stupid. And I realised that the medical world were not ready to hear that. And it's a source of frustration to me that I hear sometimes. I can remember just maybe 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe listening to the Jeremy Vine show on BBC Radio 2 in Britain, and hearing Dr. Sarah Jarvis talk very authoritatively about endometriosis and all the trials and tribulations and what you have to do, and food was not part of it at all. And it never is. It's never included. So most people will not know that it's even a possibility, and that what they eat is going to make a difference to them. And it will just perpetuate problems that they will then dampen down with treatments of one sort or another, none of which are very pleasant, and surgery, which of course I think is a dangerous thing to be having when you don't need to. I mean, surgery is a tremendous tool that we have in our healthcare, but when you don't need it because you've simply got ill because of eating the wrong food, that's tragic, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane, and I think like it is slowly evolving. It is slowly coming to light, especially when you have like the plant-based professionals, the plant-based doctors coming out. There's a lot more information coming out these days, which I say some people some people like are aware of, but some people still will see that and be like, nah. Like this is not for me, because it doesn't fit their agenda of how they want to eat. So when they say that this could potentially be a life-saving food or a life-saving diet, if it doesn't fit what they want to hear, they won't listen to it. And this is one of these things that I'm glad the information's out there now, and it is slowly growing. There is more of it, but it's just now getting it into people's heads as well.
Yeah, and that big cultural change, I don't know how that could be affected, really. I mean, I remember, was it last year, there was some slightly I mean, I laughed, but it was tragic as well, that some publication of research about a certain percentage of men would rather die early than stop eating meat.
Oh, I saw that. That was I think that was actually this year.
Oh, was it this year?
Yeah, it was this year. It's been a long year.
Yeah,
I saw that. It was like, I think it was like 59% of the UK's population would rather die early than give up eating meat. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Yes. Like it blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. But then again, I also know people like that.
It's a real attachment. I mean, it's a kind of imprisonment if you're going to allow yourself to be ill and allow yourself to die early because you cannot think of giving something up, which it's so short-lived, that pain. It really is. The transition isn't pleasant necessarily, but it is so short-lived. It's so worth it.
I think once your body starts to realize, especially when you're feeding the gut microbiome, the food it wants, for like a period of time, it starts to crave that. So when you start eating junk again, your body really takes a hit. And this is the thing, especially when you give up meat and that, for the first 2 weeks, it might be a bit hard, especially with like dairy and that, because there's so many different chemicals and toxins inside that are luring you back to that, because it's just full of additives. And once you take those away, and once you've got over that initial kind of 2-week period, then your body doesn't actually crave it anymore. It's just, but that's what people are scared of. This is because it's that first 2 weeks. And past that, it's the easiest thing. Like, I can't remember the last time I've craved anything, especially meat-wise. If anything, the thought of it now makes me feel a bit queasy.
It does me as well. I'm not even keen on. I'm really not keen on looking at it. So, not only have we both, the two of us, become fully plant-based in our food, we've also it's led on to us being fully vegan as well, and thinking about everything that we buy. There's a much bigger picture here, and it does impact on the planet, and we know about that. That's gaining in momentum. I think that idea that we need to eat differently for our own planetary home. But yeah, I never expected to be vegan. It was one of those things that I wasn't going to do that. The strange hippie people doing.
I think that is everybody. At one point, they're like, "Oh, I can never do that," and the next thing you know, 5 years later, I am. Oh, good.
Oh, I am. Yeah.
But this obviously led to Henry and Henry in the end,
It did.
which we did discuss a few weeks back. But at the same time, there is different, like from what Graham is doing to what you're doing. There is slightly different because you've got. Is it next year that you're launching your little meditation class? That is.
I am. I used to teach about 4 years ago. I was teaching meditation. I became an accredited mind calm and body calm coach, and we really we enjoyed teaching this. What very often happened was that we would either go to a venue or have these small groups in our own home and provide food. And this is how the food thing got going, really, because we're providing food in the middle. Which was quite good. It's just worth saying that even though we were giving people a tremendous amount of fat, and I feel quite bad about it now, but they weren't eating carby lunches, because the very first class I did, I can remember, it was a full day class in Ulverston, and everybody went out for lunch, and they went to the nearest cafe, got the biggest pasty they could find, ate the pasty. Well, guess what they were like in the afternoon? They were all asleep, and trying to teach meditation to people who are asleep, this doesn't work. So it was good that giving people food that wasn't so carby was actually quite useful in that regard. And so anyway, yes, I was teaching meditation, and it was really instrumental in an aspect of my life that meant such a lot to me, because unfortunately in 2012 my dad fell into a mysterious coma. We still don't really know. Well, we will never know why really. There was nothing to pinpoint why it would have happened. He was perfectly healthy the day before he'd been out on his bicycle, and he stayed in a coma for 2 years, just over 2 years, and we were visiting him as often as we could. My parents were in Nottingham, and it was this meditation, the type that I'd learned. It was mind calm, body calm, developed by somebody called Sandy Newbegin, and I'd learned to do it for myself and to teach it, and it was tremendous. It made me see the whole thing very differently, and took a lot of the. I mean, it could have been such an incredibly stressful time. It was stressful, but I managed to see the beauty in it. I managed to see that I had an opportunity to give my dad some attention, because he'd been incredibly supportive of me all my life, and I had the chance to take some care of him, if you like, as we all did, and I will never be I can't possibly ever regret learning that. And I've continued with the meditation. I've always meditated. We stopped teaching it because things just took a different direction with the food, really. But I think it's time to bring it back. And the calm part of it stands for conscious awareness life meditation. And we've become very aware of two things, really, two directions of compassion. One is that the vegan group that we are familiar with, which is where we met you, the Vegan Business Tribe, is full of really compassionate people. And it's been quite striking. And it's given us an idea that very often veganism is synonymous with compassion. It's also been, unfortunately, apparent that compassion has taken a bit of a knock lately, and that what with going back as far as Brexit and Trump, and now all the things relating to coronavirus and treatments for it, this, that, and the other, there's a lot of compassion missing between people, because of course people are afraid, and people are angry, and there's a lot of discord, and it's causing breakups with friends and arguments and hatred that you encounter on the social media and so on. And we thought it's time for us to bring some compassion to the world, and more consciousness, which definitely fits in with being vegan. And it just seems like the right time to do it. I'm really excited about starting it. So I'm doing a couple of taster sessions, and January we'll see the start of a new 10-week class online. I mean, it's going to be different. I can't do it in person, which I've loved doing, but I see no reason why it shouldn't work perfectly well online as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That's amazing, because when I first got the email that you're doing it, I was like, this is amazing, because obviously what you're doing together in Henry and Henry anyway, like sharing these articles, allowing people to have that, like, a voice, and helping people to find out more about plant-based nutrition, and just have this community hub, which is incredible. And I was always wondering where you were going to go with it, and then having this as well on top is absolutely incredible. You are aligning your compassionate, you're aligning your veganism, and just aligning everything into one with, like, meditation. And it's absolutely beautiful to see. I'm actually very excited for you both.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, we're excited. We obviously don't know how it's all going to develop, but you've got to try these things and keep at it, because I think it's well worth it. I think the world needs whatever we can do to help at the moment, and there are lots of people thinking along those lines, and hopefully that things will. We're at a turning point, I think, and being right in it, you can't see how it's going to pan out. So we'll just have to do our best and try to emphasize compassion, emphasize awareness and consciousness, and the natural world to some degree as well, and learn to love it more.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap this up in a second, but before we do, we have a few more little questions. There's more of the fun questions, to be fair, more than anything. So obviously, like, I asked Graham, and I actually assumed that your answer might be exactly the same. But so when you've had a very, very long day, a stressful day, and you got home, you've got, like, you don't particularly want to cook, and you want to do something very easy, what is your go-to?
At the moment, because it's winter, it's soup, because our soups are really fast and easy to make. We make we sometimes have raw soup. We still have them warm. As I said, we have this super duper high speed industrial blender, and it warms, the centrifugal force warms the soup. But in the summer, there have been times it's just a case of can't be bothered to make anything. It's quite late now. Fruit. It's not the ideal bedtime snack, but you know what? If you don't overdo it and you're a bit careful with the fruits you choose, bananas work well. Then fruit is fine. The fruit's always a bit of a go-to for don't know what to do. And traveling, when we were traveling, we didn't have any food with us particularly, and we were traveling in COVID times. It wasn't very easy to go to restaurants and so on in certain places. So when we were traveling to come here, fruit. You could always get fruit. That was the one thing we could always rely on. Fruit, and maybe a few nuts, and maybe some dried fruit as well.
Yeah. So I think, Graham, I'm actually going to try it out today as well, is the mushroom soup that I saw the video of.
Oh, I love it. So easy. So easy. Oh, steamed mushrooms are just wonderful. I think I love it. If you like mushrooms, I think you can't fail to like steamed mushrooms. So if you like them, Callum, I would suggest holding a few back so you can put them into the soup, so you've got a few whole ones as well. Give yourself a treat.
Yeah, I was going to try it last week, but didn't have enough mushrooms to do it. Why? I thought I had enough mushrooms. I did not. So I have been out. Well, I haven't been out. I've had mushrooms delivered, because I'm still isolating.
Not so much fun.
And I'm going to make it tonight, so I will let you know how it goes.
Oh, brilliant! Yes, please do. Yes. Yeah, we use chia seeds, don't you? It gives it a it's great. It really is. It's superb. So easy. So chia seeds, lemon juice. That's about it. Water. Job done.
And last of all, for anybody struggling with endometriosis, I can never say it.
Difficult.
Do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Yes, I do actually. I would say learn that you can trust in your own body, and that may include reading a lot, finding out a lot, and do look up organizations such as the plant-based health professionals. They do have information that's really very useful on all sorts of topics, and they have a lot of it's freely available. That's the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK I'm talking about them. There are groups in other countries as well. In terms of, I think if you've got this condition and you've probably sought medical advice. And I wouldn't say drop that like a hot stone, but please try to see your doctor as a partner in your progress, rather than somebody who is your master telling you what you must do, because through no fault of their own, they may know nothing about nutrition or things that you can do to support your body to get well, because it's about supporting your body. It's not taking something to hit at a problem in the way that medication sometimes does. So it's a very different proposition when you're eating or meditating or doing yoga or taking exercise, going running. You're supporting your body in its quest for health. Your body's always seeking balance, and if you can give it what it needs, then you're on the right track. The doctor may not really understand that, which is disappointing. You may need some medical intervention, so you may need the health professional, but many of them really do appreciate you taking a role in your own healing. That the specialist I saw was wonderful. He loved the fact that I was keen to sort things out for myself. He was very supportive. They're so used to telling people what to do because that people just go to the doctor and almost hand themselves over and say, "I'm sick, cure me." Well, partner up with your doctor instead. And I think that's probably the best advice I can give. And if necessary, go to somebody else. That's always another possibility. If the doctor isn't quite willing to work on that basis, maybe try and find another one.
Annette, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's always lovely chatting with you.
Oh, and I've loved it too. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's no worries at all.